There we go. All right, lecture 9. Today's lecture is going to be on adding and subtracting. Adding and subtracting what? Rational expressions. Okay, let me pull it up a little bit. All right, so when we add and subtract, what we want to have is we want to have a kind of like a checklist of sorts to make sure that we're on the right path for all this stuff. So let's go ahead and copy down some notes. All right, the first step is to factor as much as you can. Factor as much as you can. Once you do that, what you want to do is you want to find a lowest common denominator. Find the lowest common denominator. And sometimes you'll see this written as LCD. LCD. That just stands for lowest common denominator. All right, once you want to find that, you have to do step 3. So let's write that down. Step 3. What you want to do next is you want to multiply the top and the bottom. Multiply the, let's say, numerator and denominator. You want to multiply them by the missing factors. And we'll talk about that when we do the first example. And the last step after that is number 4. You have to add or subtract the tops or the numerators. Okay, so we got a lot of stuff going on. So let me zoom out so you can see it a little bit better. And I want to do our first little example about this. Okay, let's talk about adding and subtracting fractions. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's look at our first example. The first example is going to be 1/2 plus 2/3. So let's talk about this one. So I've got two fractions, 1/2 and 2/3. I'm adding them up. And the first thing I want to do is, since I don't have any x's, I can't factor anything. They're just numbers. I'm going to go directly to step 2, which is to find the lowest common denominator. Now, looking at the denominators, you have 2 and you have 3, right? What I want to do is I want to find the lowest common denominator. I want to find out what's the smallest number that they can both become. So what's the smallest number these two numbers can both become? 2 and 3. You'll also see this written as the lowest common multiple. That's the same thing. All right, so what can 2 and 3 both become? they can both become 6, right? So they can both become 6. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Let's look at the first fraction, this 1/2 right here. You have 2 at the bottom. What do I have to multiply 2 by to get to 6? What do I have to multiply 2 by to get to 6? I've got to multiply by 3, right? So that means I have to multiply by 3 on the top. What's 1 times 3 going to be? That's just going to be 3. Okay. How about the next fraction? This 3 at the bottom. How does this 3 become a 6? What do I have to multiply the 3 by to get to 6? I have to multiply 3 by 2, right? That means I've got to multiply the top by 2 as well. So I'm going to put times 2 up here. Okay. What's 2 times 2? That's going to be 4. So now I've got the same denominator. That means I can add up the numerators now. So what's 4 plus 3 at the top? That's going to be 7. And the denominator stays the same, 7 over 6. We're going to do one more like that. Let's do 3/4 minus 1/2. 3/4 minus 1/2. Okay. The first thing you notice is the denominators are not the same yet. So we need to make them the same. So what's the smallest number that 4 and 2 can both become? And remember, it's got to be the smallest number. It can't be something like 100. Yeah, we know that 4 and 2 can both become 100. But we don't want to go up that far, right? We want to choose the smallest number. You can think of it as the most efficient number they can both become. So how about 4 and 2? They can both become a 4, right? The 4 is already a 4, but the 2 can become a 4 by multiplying by what? 2. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put everything over 4. All right. So the first fraction, I don't really need to change, right? Because it's already have 4 in the denominator. So I'm going to leave that 3 right there. Let's look at the next fraction. How can the 2 become a 4? How can that 2 become a 4? I have to multiply by what? A 2, right? So that means I have to multiply the top by 2. All right. So 1 times 2 is going to give me what? 1 times 2 is going to give me 2. All right. So now I've got the same denominator. That means I can now mess with the numerators. What's 3 minus 2 at the top going to be? That's going to be 1. So my answer is 1/4. Okay. Now let's look at some of the problems that I wanted to look at. We're going to do adding and subtracting rational expressions. And I think the first example I'm going to do doesn't really have anything to do with the problem sets, but we can get to those later. Okay. Let's say over here I have 2x on top, and then on the bottom I'm going to have x squared plus 7x plus 12. and I want to add it to this fraction. 3 over x plus 3. Okay, so right away, I see that there's something that I can factor. And the first step is factor as much as you can. So I'm going to factor what's down here. I need to multiply to 12, but add up to 7. So I know that I can use two numbers to do this for me, right? I know it's going to be x plus 3, x plus 4. So we're going to change this to x plus 3 and x plus 4. And this over here, I didn't really have to factor this yet. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. All right, so the only thing I've done so far is I factored as much as I can. What do I do now? What's the second step? I need to find the LCD, right? I need to find the lowest common denominator. So what can the denominators, this x plus 3, this x plus 4, this x plus 3, what can they both become? They can both become this, right? So look at where my pen is. X plus 3 and x plus 4, I've got those two factors, right? Over here, I only have the x plus 3. So what that means is this is missing an x plus 4, right? The first fraction has the x plus 4. I know that. But this fraction only has the x plus 3. I need an x plus 4, right? So let me change my color to red, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. This fraction is missing the x plus 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 4. I'm multiplying the top and the bottom by x plus 4. That's my missing factor, okay? So this is step 3. We're multiplying the top and the bottom by what's missing, this x plus 4, okay? So let's see what that does. The first fraction is actually going to stay the same. It doesn't change yet. So this is still x plus 3, x plus 4, and I've still got that 2x at the top. Now let's look at this fraction over here. What can I do at the top? What I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 3 by everything that's at the top right here by using the distributive property. So what's 3 times x? That's going to be 3x. Put my plus down. And now let's look at 3 times 4. What's 3 times 4 going to be? That's going to be 12, right? So all I've done is I've kind of messed with the top a little bit. The bottom is still the same though. I've got that x plus 3 and that x plus 4. All right, good. So now what you notice is the denominators are the same now. So when the denominators are the same, can I mess with the numerators a little bit now? I sure can, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add the tops together. I've got a 2x plus 3x plus 12. So what's that going to be? Okay, so let's think about the x's first. What's 2x plus 3x? Isn't that just 5x? Yeah. And then this number over here, I just need to bring it down. So the plus 12 is going to come down. And the denominator is still what? X plus 3, x plus 4? Good. And there's nothing else we can do to this. We're done. We can't factor anything else, right? So once you add the numerators together, now that the denominators are the same, you'll get your answer. Okay. We're going to work on an example that's just like that. As soon as I get it ready. Okay, let's look at this one. All right, so here I have two fractions. I'm subtracting them this time. Notice that's a difference from the last one. This time I'm subtracting. And then the first step that we do is we factor everything that we can. The first fraction, notice you have a 10 at the top. You have an x squared minus 9 at the bottom. I can factor this by squares, right? So what do I need to square to get to 9? 3, right? So I'm going to bring down the 10, and I'm going to write this as x plus 3, x minus 3. So that'll factor the bottom. I got to have that plus and that minus because we're doing difference of squares. And the second fraction over here, that's going to stay the same. I've still got 1 over x minus 3. So now, what's the second fraction missing at the bottom that the first fraction has? What's that missing factor? You see what it is? It's this right here. Notice they both have an x minus 3, but this one is missing the x plus 3 that it needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 3. So let's do that. Okay, so now the denominators are pretty much the same. You got your x plus 3 and you got your x minus 3. That's your lowest common denominator. So now let's look at the tops. Is there anything that I can simplify? Is there anything that I can multiply? Well, the first fraction is going to stay the same. I didn't really have to change the first fraction. So let's just bring it down the way it is. 10 over x plus 3 and x minus 3. Good. The second fraction, notice how we have a 1 at the top. We're multiplying that by x plus 3. And if we multiply anything by 1, we pretty much get the same thing back, right? So bring down your minus sign. And we're going to change the top into x plus 3. And at the bottom, I've still got my two factors, right? X minus 3 and x plus 3. Okay, now that the denominators are the same, we've multiplied the tops and the bottoms by that x plus 3. Now what we can do is we can subtract the numerators, okay? Let's do that. So at the bottom, I've still got that x plus 3 and that x minus 3. But what I want to do now is I want to fool around with the tops of the fractions. So I've got 10 minus, and I'm going to put this in parentheses because this is important, x plus 3. So what is this going to become? Well, notice I'm subtracting everything that's over here. So I need to do 10 minus x, 10 minus 3. What's that going to be? Well, if I do the numbers first, what's 10 minus 3? 10 minus 3 would just be 7, right? And then what happens to the x's? Well, we're subtracting it, right? So that's going to be 7 minus x. And I've still got the x plus 3 and the x minus 3 in the denominator. And we're done. 7 minus x over x plus 3 times x minus 3. That is the answer. And notice, there's no way we can factor this down a little bit more. There's no way we can simplify it anymore. That's basically, we've got what we've got. Can't do anything else to that. Okay. Let's look at some of the problem sets so we can get ready for the classwork. I want to look at number 1 and number 2. Okay. Problem set. So I've only got 5 problems in the problem set. Same way for the classwork. I've only got 5 problems. Because these can get kind of involved. I didn't want to give you too many of them. So let's just try number 1 together. I've got 3 over x plus 4 over x. All right. Now for this one, do I need to factor anything? No. Everything looks like it's already pretty much as simplified as it can get. What's my second step? Find the LCD. Well, don't we already have an LCD? Isn't x going to be the lowest common denominator? And since they match up already, can I just add the numerators? Yeah. So what's 3 plus 4 going to be? That's going to be 7. So 7 over x is our answer. So for this one, we've already got the lowest common denominator. So we can just add the numerators, and that's it. Let's try number 2. I've got 3 over x plus 2. And then over here, I've got 4 over x plus 5. Okay. So first step, can we factor anything? No, we can't factor anything. Okay, so just move directly to the second step. Find the lowest common denominator. What's our lowest common denominator? What is it? Well, these two factors are so different that we got to include them both. So we need both of them. So our LCD is actually going to be x plus 2 times x plus 5. Okay, but how do we write these as fractions? Well, let's go ahead and try it. So for the first fraction, I've got 3 on top, and I've got x plus 2 on the bottom. Notice how this x plus 2 is missing an x plus 5. It's missing the x plus 5. So that means I've got to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 5, right? Okay, let's look at the next fraction. What is the next fraction missing? Well, I've got a 4 on top. I've got an x plus 5 at the bottom. This one is missing the x plus 2, right? It's missing the x plus 2. So I've got to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 2. Okay, so now the denominators are the same. Let's mess with the numerators a little bit, and then we'll add them up later. Okay, so at the top of this one, when I distribute that 3, that means I need to multiply 3 by everything in parentheses. So 3 times x, that's going to give me 3x. Plus what? 3 times 5, that's going to give me 15. And at the bottom, I've still got that x plus 2 and that x plus 5. That stays the same. All right, let's look over here. Let's multiply the 4 by everything inside. 4 times x will give me 4x. 4 times 2 will give me 8. The bottom stays the same, x plus 5, x plus 2. So now the denominators are the same. I've simplified the numerators, and now I can just add or subtract the numerators if I need to. So let's look at what that is. 3x plus 4x, that's going to give me 7x. And then 15 plus 8, what's that going to give me? That's going to give me 23, right? So plus 23. So then at the bottom, I still have that x plus 2 times the x plus 5. And that's it. I can't do anything else to it. All right, I've got 5 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do number 5 on the problem set, I think. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, let's look at number 5. Number 5 says what? 2x plus 7 over x squared plus 10x plus 24. And I'm subtracting what? 1 over x plus 6. Okay, so the first thing I do is I factor it if I think it needs to be factored. So the 24, that's 4 times 6. So I'm going to write the bottom as x plus 4 and x plus 6 while leaving the top the same. 2x plus 7. Okay. And the second fraction, I can't factor yet. So I'm going to leave that the same. Okay. So all I've done is I factored the bottom of the first fraction. Now I can start finding that lowest common denominator. So what is the LCD? Well, it's going to be x plus 4 times x plus 6. The problem is this fraction is missing what? It's missing the what? The x plus 4, right? It's missing that. So I've got to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 4. So when I do that, it's basically going to look like this. Make sure you're multiplying the top and the bottom. And now I'm going to mess with the tops a little bit since the bottoms are now the same. Okay. So at the bottom, I've got x plus 4, x plus 6. This is still the same, 2x plus 7. And over here, the denominator is x plus 6, x plus 4. All right, so now the denominators are the same. I can mess with the numerators. I'm going to multiply 1 by everything inside here to get 1x plus 4. And I'm not going to write the 1 in front of the x. It's already understood to be there. Okay, so now what I have to do is I need to subtract the tops. Once you got the denominators to being the same, you can pretty much just mess with the numerators and then you're done. So let's do the x's together. What's 2x minus 1x? 2x minus 1x is just 1x. Now let's do the numbers. What is 7 minus 4? 7 minus 4 is 3. A positive 3, right? So now that's what the top is going to be. And the bottom is just going to be x plus 4 times x plus 6. And we're done. Okay, so that's adding and subtracting. I kind of left this for the end because it's the hardest technique to do when you're dealing with rational expressions. Multiplying and dividing is actually a whole lot easier, as well as simplifying. That's really easy. But this is kind of tough, so that's why I left this for this week.